Welcome to the Power of Nature podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Waldo. In this show, I talk about how connecting with nature and the natural world can create amazing and immeasurable benefits for us and in our lives. I share stories of my experiences doing this as part of a regular and ongoing practice, and I talk to others about their experiences with the power of nature as well. So join me as we go on a journey of learning about the power of nature and the impact that it can have on our own lives. Welcome back to the Power of Nature podcast. Or if you're new to this show and just tuning in today, thanks for joining us. In this show, I talk about and share stories of how nature, up until all the shows to date, how nature has, the power of nature has affected me in ways that go beyond just often the typical. And what I've learned from different facets of nature, and how by tuning into the power of nature and understanding it more and allowing myself to see and learn from it, it has benefited me in immeasurable ways. And that's what I talk about in all of this show, and that's what I've talked about in all of the episodes to date. And so I've talked about a bunch of different aspects of nature, just nature overall. More recently, I've talked about specific facets of nature, like the wind or rain, skies, and clouds. Last episode, I talked about volcanoes and other kind of nature forces like that include a buildup. But today I really want to talk about something that is near and dear to my heart, and that is trees. The subject of trees, the power of trees. It's funny that it would be 11 episodes in before I would talk about the power of trees, because I feel like my awareness, when I take a sip of my tea, I would say trees have probably had the biggest effect on me from nature throughout my entire life, just over and over and over again. But a few days ago, I was thinking, I need to record another Power of Nature podcast. What should it be on? And I usually just kind of sit and let it come to me. And the thought of trees came, and I was like, wow, why didn't I do that before? But I kind of didn't really focus on it too much. It was just a fleeting thought. But then I pondered for a moment, literally just, it was like 60 seconds of just reflecting a little bit on trees. And I realized that trees have been so powerful in the backdrop of my entire life that it's almost like they've been the backdrop of my life, and I haven't even kind of noticed how important they have been. It's a funny thing, this kind of situation, where isn't it sometimes the stuff that it's like are so part of the fabric of our being or the fabric of our life, and are just so there always that we don't even see them until something brings our attention to it, and we're like, wow, that's a really big deal. Well, that's how I feel about trees. I feel like trees have been so huge for me my whole life. And some ways I'm aware of this. And in some other ways, as I was sitting the other day, I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many other ways trees have affected me. And I never even kind of was consciously aware of it. And I find that this is not unusual. You know, a lot of times there are the things that we kind of have and do and be that are just there, that we don't see, that are kind of like our gifts. You know, it's like we do it, so we just assume they're there and we just kind of take them almost for granted. It's not like an intentional thing, but we do. But as I was sitting and thinking the other day for literally like 60 seconds, it was like I was almost like shown a flash of trees and their impact that they've had on me in my life over and over and over again in ways I hadn't even acknowledged. And I thought I was pretty aware of my connection and love of trees, but I realized I had barely scratched the surface. And this is kind of an interesting thing. It seems that what I've discovered is often that the things that are so important to us and so innate to us and who we are and what we be meaning how we live in the world and the choices we make through our own choices versus those that have maybe been taught to us and we've done by default, that we often don't see those things. It's like they kind of are little background things that we don't even see. But I think it's really important to see. I think it's really important to see these things that are kind of playing in the background of us and our awareness and what makes us and our lives what they are. So let's dive into this. I have, I can't remember on this show because I have multiple shows and sometimes it's hard to remember the exact, other than topics, the exact specific other personal details I share. But I drink a beautiful Yunnan tea in the morning. I don't know. I love the ritual of it. And this morning I have one that just seems to taste so good. It's like, have you ever had that where it's like the perfect, I don't know, it's the perfect temperature. It's not, I use honey to sweeten it. It's not too sweet because I've made it too sweet. It's not too not sweet because I've done that before. It's like perfect. And I'm sitting in my office right now. It's a gray day in Montana. I have my office cat here sitting with me. I call her Art Cat. She has another name too called Kit Kat. She's probably going to be accompanying me for this episode because I've been sick for a few days and she hadn't seen as much of me. So she's a bit of a stray cat that can be very spunky, but I've noticed when I'm away from her for a while, she comes close. And so today she might be doing that. So the kinds of noises you might be hearing in the background are noises from my house because I have other family members that are up and about and doing things. And I'm not going to try to stop this recording. B, you might hear Art Cat. She might decide to run around as I talk. She sometimes does that. Seems like when my emotions get strong, she runs around. And C, you might hear me drink my tea. Usually I'll give you a heads up. And I apologize for the slurping. It's just the way my microphone works. I'm not a particular slurper of tea. But I believe in keeping it real. And this is real. This is my life. This is real. And I think trees, you know, this ties into the topic of trees because I think trees have it's just had so many effects on me, so many so much impact on my life. But one of the things I think is they've helped me keep it real. They've helped me keep it real, meaning just by their presence, by their nature, by their existence. There's something about them and how they touch my heart and my soul that just always, it has affected me, and it's like it's tuned me into the need to listen to myself, to listen to my own inner self and who I truly am and what I truly want, and to be brave and courageous and do that. But it's like, and I talk about this in all of my shows, but I feel like trees have had such a role. So I'm going to talk about some of those things, and they're not going to be in any particular order. One of the first things that comes to mind about trees is in around 2001, I think it was. So 23 years ago, yeah, a bit of a time from now. Things were pretty different. We had the internet back then. I had worked in the internet industry, and originally the software industry, and then in the internet industry when it was just starting, and did some really cool things, had some really cool experiences, and worked for a top interactive agency in the city of San Francisco, California. Here comes the sip of my tea. And had some really great experiences. We sat around a conference table working hard and long hours, but thinking about, would people ever do e-commerce? Would people ever buy things online? Would we ever be able to do things, which is so funny, like the kinds of things we do now on the internet and online are just so crazy, because back then nobody knew if any of it would ever be possible. And I can't tell you what it feels like to recall those days, but I had a lot of fun and did a lot of hard work doing that. And then I started my own technology company and internet company startup during the .com days. And then after that, I started a consulting business. And trees for sure played a role in my life prior to that. But I don't know that I was kind of like directly like woken up to it in a way until I started that consulting business. It's like I knew that I had loved nature. I knew I moved to San Francisco, California from Pennsylvania because I loved, the landscape. I loved the look of nature. I loved the lifestyle of the San Francisco Bay Area at the time, which was kind of a work hard, but also appreciate nature kind of a thing. I loved the mountains. I loved going to Lake Tahoe and being in the mountains with the trees. I knew that. I knew my connection with trees in that way. But it was around 2001 when I started a consulting business that I think there's some way in which the role of trees came to me in a much more conscious way. I was trying to name my company, and what I knew I wanted to do was I wanted to be able to help people start and grow their businesses. That's what I knew I wanted to do. I wanted to use my business experience to help people start and grow their businesses from more of a business strategy and marketing vantage point. So the name that came to me, and I don't remember exactly how this came to me, but it was very clear. Sometimes with names, I've named a lot of companies over the years, but sometimes with names, you do a big process and then you come up with a name. Other times you just land on it like right out of the gate, and it's almost like it's just given to you like this little wrapped up package. And that's the way this was for my consulting company. The name, The Seedling Group. The Seedling Group. Wow. I still kind of feel chills with the impact of it. The Seedling Group made so much sense to me because in my decision to leave the companies that I had been working for before I started my own .com company. I hate that word .com. It was really, an e-commerce based innovative company. .com is just this term that other people kind of came in, and then everything got grouped into this .com category. But that's a whole other conversation. But there's a way in which I wanted to, I wanted to utilize my experience, and trees somehow seemed to really help me. I wasn't aware of it the way I am now, but I think some part of me was aware of it the way I am now, which is often the case with our truest, deepest inner guidance. It knows. So, in starting in leaving companies that I worked for, interactive agencies, and deciding to start my first .com, I'll just use that term, it had come to me because I had been feeling unhappy, and I had been feeling like confused. I wasn't having the experiences in the companies I was working with that I was hoping for, and I knew there was more. Sorry, got to take a sip of my tea here. I knew there was more, and I started running. I had been running. I'd been a runner. I'd done a lot of running. I think I talked a lot about this already in the show. But at that time, I was living in what's called the Castro neighborhood of San Francisco, which has a lot of hills. And I ran up to a park in San Francisco called Buena Vista Park. Now, I have no idea what the state of Buena Vista Park is like these days. Probably nothing like what it was like, 20 some years ago. But back then it was beautiful. And I would run up on streets and sidewalks to get up, up to Buena Vista Park. And I would run in the park, and in the park were these amazing eucalyptus trees and a view of the city. And I believe you could see the ocean from there, because it's this kind of high hill that sits up, and you could maybe even see the Golden Gate Bridge. I can't quite remember. It's been a while. But I know that there was some way of feeling the power of being up on this hill and running, which, is powerful in and of itself in nature, but in particular these trees, these eucalyptus trees. If you're not familiar with eucalyptus trees, they tend to be, I'm not going to get into the technical explanation. So if you're looking for that, go Google it. But my impression of them, what stuck with me was they were these really big trees, and they always had this kind of silvery gray bark that kind of like almost looked like it was peeling in parts, not in a bad way, but in a textured kind of way. And then they had these big, branches and these green, I don't know, leaves or whatever. But it was always the trunk of the tree that really spoke to me, and the size of the tree and the texture of the tree that seemed to speak to me. So I would go running, and I would run among, these eucalyptus trees. And I did this to try to understand what the heck was going on in my career and what wasn't going on, because I wasn't feeling good about it. I wasn't feeling good. I'd been at one company that I had enjoyed a lot of, but there were some things there with my boss that did not work for me. And then I had left that job to go to another company that I made a lot of promises about certain things being certain ways, and they were the exact opposite. So I left that company, and I basically quit my job. I had a little bit of savings, not much. And believe me, I was not a, what do you call those kids that have money? A trust fund kid. I was not a trust fund kid. I didn't have any savings. I had like a little bit of money. Like, I don't know, probably like $1,000, $2,000, not much. Maybe if that. So it wasn't like, I could just quit my job. I had like rent to pay and a car payment and everything. But I got to that point where I was just so unhappy. And I quit my job somehow. And I didn't know if I'd be able to get another job. I don't remember exactly what the economy was like at that point. I don't think it was great. But I decided to do it. And I went running among the eucalyptus trees in Buena Vista Park and other places. I'm pretty sure I drove over to Marin County and ran there, and went to some parks. Basically got out in nature, which I've talked about in this show. Are you detecting a theme here? How when I have had challenges in my life, I've gone into nature, and ding, 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 it's helped me. This is what this show is about. Because maybe it can help you too. If not, no problem. Turn this episode off. Find something that does. Nothing is right for everybody. But it helped me. And so here I was, doing, in a way, kind of what felt like the only thing I could do, because I was really unhappy and things weren't working at all, and I could feel it, and I couldn't take it anymore, and I quit my job without much money and without a cushion and scared to death, really. And I started running. And I started running and running among the eucalyptus trees. And as I did that, I don't know, clarity started to come. Not all at once. It wasn't like, I'm not going to make those kinds of promises to you. It wasn't like, oh, I went on a run and then boom, all these ideas just came instantly downloaded. No, it wasn't like that. It wasn't like that. I won't lie to you like that. They were small changes. I went on a run. I noticed I didn't feel quite as crappy. I was able to focus on the trees. I still was miserable. I went on another run. I noticed I felt a little better after I got through the, climbing up the hill and being out of breath and whatever. And I was pretty fit at that point, so I had been running for a while. But, I was running up San Francisco hills. If you don't know what they are, you can Google them. They're pretty much straight up, especially in, there's a big hill that you do in the Castro. You go kind of straight up a hill to get to Buena Vista Park. from where I lived. So, it would be like this exhausting part of the run. And then I would get up there and it'd be like, and I would feel a little better. And slowly and slowly and slowly, I started to feel a little bit better. Nothing got fixed in my world. It's not like, oh, a miraculous job came or everything got all lined up and everything was suddenly perfect. I'm not going to sell you that kind of a system and try to convince you that that was the case. It wasn't. It was a little bit at a time and a little bit at a time. And my voice saying, go for another run. Go back up in those trees. Go for another one. Run. Go back up in those trees. And I noticed I kind of felt not so crappy. So I did it. I was desperate to kind of do anything. So eventually what ended up happening is an idea came for me. And that idea was a really, really unique idea for an internet company. And when I say really unique, I'm not just tooting my own horn. I mean, literally, I had worked at a company where we worked on, really innovative concepts. This wasn't a Me Too idea. There were lots of people sell pet food online as a .com. And then everybody else would be like, we're also going to sell pet food online. It wasn't that kind of an idea. Okay. It was the kind of idea that I talk about a lot, where, it really pulled together my own unique experiences and what I saw in a new way about the potential of technology and the internet and what could be done and my background and my experience. And I, created this company. And then I went on, to be the founder and CEO and, raise money and hire a management team and all of that. Those trees were really important in that process. Now, there is a period and a time when, the .com crash happened and we needed to raise our next round, our big round of funding. And I had been working like a dog and I was burnt out, to say the least. There are a lot of things I would do differently than what my young version of myself did back then. Things that I know about self-care and listening to myself that I wouldn't have taken on, and I would have focused on supporting myself in other ways. But I didn't know those things back then. I was still earlier on the path of understanding how to consciously listen to myself. But it ended up at a certain point that one of my lead investors was willing to kind of try to keep going, but I had lost my steam for my company, and the entire .com industry was imploding, exploding, shutting down. Nothing was getting funding and nothing was moving. Everybody was losing their jobs. It was a crazy time to be in San Francisco. So after that, I decided to kind of throw in the towel. And that was hard. And I did a lot of reflecting after that. And I did a lot of reflecting, guess where? In the woods, around trees. Because, are you detecting a theme here? It's like, I felt really bad. I felt really confused. It was several years later that one of my advisors came back to me with a very well-known person that had made a lot of money and had a lot of money and was funding companies. And they wanted to meet with me because the business had been so good. The business that I had then given up on, the .com. At that point, I had moved on, and I didn't kind of have the heart to go back into it. But this is relevant because it really was a pretty amazing, timeless business concept and idea that we were doing. And it was tied into a lot of bad timing, bad situation, etc. And this is part of what I had to reflect on after I had made the decision to, to stop doing it. I was really confused because I knew how right the company was, but yet there were these circumstances that made continuing it really feel impossible. And maybe they were possible in ways that I just couldn't see at that age. I was 28 years old, I think, 29, something like that. But I felt pretty confused, and the economy in San Francisco was really bad. Everybody was being laid off from all their jobs. Work was impossible to get. People were leaving the area in droves, and everybody was kind of like just buckling their seatbelt, trying to just kind of hang on. And it was during that period or after that period or during that period that I was just trying to process everything that happened. And I took to the trees and to the woods and to nature, as I've talked about in this show a lot. I took to the trees and nature because it just felt right. It felt like there was some kind of respite there. And as I spent more time, just literally, I remember just going and sitting at a picnic table in, Marin County in the woods and just sitting and just writing because I wasn't working at that time. I was just trying to recover from being an extreme workaholic in my time as a CEO and founder. Not that I hadn't been when I was an employee as well, because I had been, but when I was a CEO and founder of my own company, I really was. I did really poor choice things related to self-care, like not eating and hardly sleeping and working around the clock and traveling everywhere all over the country. And it had taken its toll. So I was trying to recover from that in the only way that I really knew how, in nature. And it was in that time that I had, in nature, from the trees around me, started to feel some sense of aliveness again. And I knew that there was a lot that I knew, a lot that I had learned, a lot that I had experienced that I wanted to be able to share with other people. I had also grown up in business. My parents had a family business. I'd learned a lot about that. I had started other businesses before the .com. I'd done a lot of freelance and worked for myself independently, but the .com was like the first official like C corporation company in which I was doing that level of a company with funding and all of that. But I had also worked with a lot of startups. I'd worked for startups, and then I'd consulted to top internet startups in the agency that I worked at in San Francisco, doing a lot of like early business strategy stuff when they had ideas, how do we take it from idea to, actual fruition. So here I was in nature trying to figure out what to do. And in nature, meaning trying to lick my wounds and figure things out. And I didn't want to do something big. I wanted to do something that felt smaller and controllable without, I don't know, just a smaller business, a smaller service-oriented business. And I decided to start a consulting company, helping smaller businesses benefit from the experience that I had with bigger companies. Now, these days, there are lots of things like that, but back then, that did not happen. It really, was not common like it is now. There was no YouTube, there was no Facebook, if people had business experience, they usually got it from either having their own business or from working in a big company. And there are a lot of things that smaller organizations didn't understand. The idea of a brand is something that even the biggest companies, some of them still didn't even really understand the full impact of that, the way that people understand now. People understand personal branding, and the world was a very different place back then, okay? Very different. For you young listeners, for you older listeners, you know what I'm talking about. But if you're a young listener, you might be like, what is she talking about? Well, just imagine everything you knew and pretty much all of it was erased. And maybe you might get a sense of what I'm talking about. And I'm not talking about cars didn't exist and whatever. We had cell phones and we had TV and we had movies and all that. I'm not talking that far back, but I'm saying a lot of the stuff related to business and branding and business strategy and all that, that did not exist. I'm going to take a drink of my tea. It's getting colder and I gotta get all the goodness before it gets too cold. Plus I need the caffeine. Anyway, it ended up that I spent all this time in nature. I had this idea for a company, a consulting company, and the name, boom, came to me. The Seedling Group. The Seedling Group. Why the Seedling Group? To me back then, it was because the Seedling Group was the idea of getting to the essence of something. What is a seedling? Well, I don't know, again, all the scientific stuff. So if you're really into that, turn the show off because you're not going to get that kind of stuff here. Or if it has to be that way for you, go find something else. I kind of generally deal with like big ideas and the big picture. And the underlying thing that's going on. And sometimes I get the little minute details wrong, if you haven't noticed. To me, a seedling is the core of something. The core of something, the core essential, most important details that then become the foundation upon which something grows. That's what the seedling is. And I was surrounded by trees all the time that had grown from some kind of seed or, whatever the other technical term is for them, some kind of start, right? So the Seedling Group really made a lot of sense to me because what I wanted to do was help people create companies or redirect their companies using the experience that I had to really have those companies be centered around, first of all, truly understanding that person and what really they care about and what makes them unique, and then growing from there. And that to me was the metaphor of seedling, right? Seedling, take the most essential things. With the seedlings are young and weak, not weak, but they're not strong like a big tree, like there are lots of seedlings and some of them don't make it and some of them do. But they have to survive, they have to have a really strong foundation, a really strong kind of almost like a brushing away of anything that's not essential. And then from there, when they get planted with the right, in the right dirt, the right environment, with the right, amount of sun and rain and and nutrients and all that, they can grow into an amazing tree. So that's what I wanted my company to be called, the Seedling Group. Not surprising as I look back now, because trees had always given me so much of, I don't want to say my foundation. It's like they brought me back to listening to my foundation. You know, I'm not a tree. I wasn't born a tree. But being among the trees, it's like their innate nature and spirit and my innate nature and spirit that maybe I hadn't been aware of or hadn't even kind of really been aware existed. It's like the tree helped me wake up to it. And this happened over and over and over again. This is what I've talked about. I mean, nature helped me wake up to it, for sure. All of nature. But trees in particular have always been really important to me. Like, if you give me a choice between an open field with nary a tree, even if it's beautiful, even if other people think it's the most beautiful, flat, treeless field they've ever seen, and you give me a choice of something next to a tree or with trees around me, I will pick the trees. It's just me and how I feel and my resonance with trees. And so here I was. I started the consulting group, consultancy, the Seedling Group. And I worked with clients and I did what I said, small businesses, helping them start kind of listening to themselves, but do it in a business context, the deepest core of themselves. Not, like I helped a writer, right? And it wasn't about just, how are you, like, what are all these 10 things that a writer needs to do to be able to market their business and grow their business? No, that's not what I did. That's not what I did. Because that's not what, to me, the Seedling Group was. To me, the Seedling Group was being able to help that person get in touch with their own unique seedling. And so I needed to understand that. And then from there, applying the knowledge I had, teaching my clients the knowledge I had gained, and being able to utilize that to then help them grow their seedling into something bigger. Now, I didn't always help people start businesses from scratch, but I did do that a lot. Often what I found in the beginning was mostly people that had kind of patched together their business and done okay. And then at a certain point, we're like, I don't know, like, it doesn't feel right. Like something's wrong. Like I'm not happy in my business. I thought starting a business was going to be what I wanted it to be. And I'm trying to do all the right things that are, talked about in the books and whatever, but things feel wrong. And I can't seem to kind of make any, gain momentum, make traction. And if they had a little bit of money for consulting, I wasn't expensive, but I didn't do my work for free. And they worked with me. I would take an existing business, but we would kind of like go back to the roots, go back to the foundation, go back to their seedling. What is their seedling? Well, in that case, because the company was based on this small person, it was based on the person, the root of the person. And that created the business. That was the foundation of the business, right? They created it for themselves. So I had to understand them, and I had to understand what they wanted and help them understand what they wanted. Because a lot of times they had never really figured that out. They hadn't ever really, I don't know, maybe they hadn't sat among the trees and have the trees help them. And maybe, I don't know, maybe that was my gift. I sat among the trees and the trees helped me, and then I was able to do that and sit among people and help them start to listen to themselves and see what they really cared about and what made them unique. And then from there, prioritize things. From there, make decisions about marketing-ish things and business strategy things. We would look at things like, are they really doing the kinds of things that in their business, offering the right kinds of services and products that really speak to their own unique take and their own unique gifts? If not, we adjusted them. Are they really working with the customers that are the kind that really benefits them? And back then, people didn't know. People now talk about, niches and avatars and, all that whole small business branding thing that's on YouTube everywhere and everybody talks about. That was not known back then. I knew about it because I had worked with these really big level brands and I had a background in communications and marketing and I had done it for years. But back then, that is not something that was known. And actually, even the biggest companies paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to branding agencies to try to figure that stuff out. But I was trying to do this with small businesses, and we were looking at their whole business at its core. Who were they serving? Is that who they wanted to serve? Is that who they enjoyed? So say, for example, the writer I worked with, he had a business. He'd been doing lots of stuff. As we kind of got into it, I realized there was this whole thing. He really liked working with other creative people. Well, he wasn't aware. He was kind of aware of it. He was aware of it. But in his business, he was kind of trying to do writing for everybody because that just seemed like what you do. And what we ended up doing is we ended up really focusing on offering services, the kinds of writing and editing services that he really enjoyed and was good at, for the kinds of people and clients that he really liked working with. And this was a very novel idea at the time. And then from there, how do we communicate that? How do we get the word out? How do we convey that? Now, this is just an example of one thing. And you might be like, what does this have to do with trees? What has a lot to do with trees? Because to me, the seedling group name came from me reflecting on my experiences with my previous company. And that idea for that company came from being around trees. The name of my consulting company, the Seedling Group, the name itself came from me being around trees. The concept and premise of what I actually was doing was about the model of a tree. To me, a seedling, like I said, is kind of like the foundational essence of something. And I really, think and believe that no two trees are alike, just like no two people are alike. We're all different in varying degrees. And I've yet to find a perfect tree because I find that there is no such thing as perfection and that every tree is just meant to be different and meant to be whatever that tree is meant to be. And from the seedling, it grows out into something, its own thing if it gets the right foundation. And it kind of like listens to itself and takes care of itself. Now, I can already see, because I've been going at this for a long time, I can see that trees have been so impactful in my life that I'm going to do a series of episodes on the power of trees. So that's what I'm going to plan to do. But I want to just leave you with one idea about the power of trees from today's episode. And that is, think about the essence of a tree, any kind of tree. It starts from something small and core, the essence of it. And from that, with the right care, it grows into something very strong. Now, I've had so many trees touch me in so many ways, and that's what I'm going to talk about in other episodes. But I think there's something to be said about this idea of understanding the essence of a tree. You know, trees, when they are strong and they grow, they can grow to be, well, when they're strong. When they grow, they can grow to live for a very long time and to be really strong and powerful and to give amazing, amazing gifts and benefits to the world at large. They can offer shade, their fruit or their leaves or their seeds or their, whatever it is that they're dropping can be nourishment for other animals. It can decompose and become sources of things for, ground, like critters that live in the ground, organisms and stuff like that. Trees can provide, oxygen for us. Trees can provide beauty. I mean, I could go on and on and on. But I think there's something about the fact that trees come from this initial kind of core thing. What I was trying to get to with the idea of the seedling group. And I really believe that for me, the power of trees has been so impactful on my life over and over and over again, because there is something about trees and the wisdom that they hold just in their appearance, their presence, the energy of us being around them, that can help us tune into the essence, the core, the seedling of us. And that seedling of us is our own deepest inner self and knowing. And it is like a foundation upon which everything else can grow and come. And it's certainly what I've experienced over and over and over again. And in all of my shows, everything I've ever done has always come from this process of me tuning back into and tuning more into my own deepest self. And I feel like trees have supported me, taught me, inspired me, and supported me in doing this along every single, along every step of my life. Anytime I've needed to make a course correction because things feel really off and confused, I go to the trees. Anytime I listen to myself enough and stop listening to what's outside of myself and I realize I'm not happy, I go to the trees. every time, even when I have no idea what's going on, I find myself in the trees. When I'm confused, I am in the trees. Any time, it's the trees. And I think the trees are really powerful. And that's what I wanted to talk about in today's episode. And I know this is just barely scratching the surface for me of the power of trees in my life. And it's something I want to continue into other episodes, but I'm going to leave today's episode at that. I'm going to finish my now cold tea, and there are other things I need to do right now. And I'm looking out at the trees out my window, and once again, they are calling me to listen to me like they always have and they always will. And I'm going to leave it at that until the next time. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Power of Nature podcast. To learn more about me and my other offerings, you can visit my website at michellewaldo.com. That's MICHELLEWALDO.com.